When working with triangles that are not right angled, there are two laws that are helpful to us when we are trying to determine missing side lengths or missing angles. One of the laws is the sine law, but a second useful law is called the cosine law. When we're looking at a diagram of a non-right angled triangle, remember that the corners where the angles are located, they're always labeled with uppercase letters, and the matching or corresponding side lengths are labeled with lowercase letters. So we have a triangle here labeled as triangle ABC, and then to the right, we've got three different variations of the cosine law. So there are three different versions because each equation is set up to solve for a different side. So for example, in the first equation, the first letter that we see here is a squared. This version of the cosine law is set up so that you can solve for side A. We also have a version set up for side B and a version set up for side C. Now, normally you wouldn't be working with all three versions at once. You're only solving for one side or one angle at a time. So the typical formula for cosine law usually follows this outline. You have one side, so the side that you're looking for, which will be squared. We have an equal sign, and then we have one of the other sides squared. So we have b squared, for instance, plus the third side squared. So we've already used A, we've already used B, so the only side that we haven't used is side C, so we have C squared. Then we have minus 2 multiplied by side B, multiplied by side C, multiplied by the cosine of angle A. So it looks a little confusing because we've got lots of little letters kind of lined up and directly side by side, but remember that this reads as 2 multiplied by side B, multiplied by side C, multiplied by the cosine of angle A. Now, a good way to remember is that if you are starting with lowercase letter a, your equation needs to end with uppercase or capital A. Same if you look at the version that is set up to solve for side B, the equation starts with lowercase b and it ends with uppercase B. If you set up to solve for side C, the equation will start with lowercase c and it will end with uppercase C. Now, while the cosine law formula does look very different from the formula that we use for sine law, sometimes it can look very overwhelming to use, but it actually can be quite simple. We're now going to go through several different examples, which will show you how to use the cosine law to solve for either a side length or for an angle. In our first example, we're asked to find the measure of side B to the nearest tenth of a centimeter. So our answer needs to be reported with only one decimal place. So the first thing that we always want to do is label our triangle with some letters. Now, they've already marked one of the sides as side B, so we definitely do need to use the letter B in our labeling. And so because this side is side B, or used with a lowercase letter b, if we go directly opposite or across from that side, that means the angle here that is marked as 52 degrees, we need to label this as angle B. Now for the other two angles and sides, you can choose whatever letters you'd like. You don't have to go in alphabetical order or use letters in alphabetical order. I'm going to keep it simple and I'm going to call this top angle angle A and this bottom corner angle angle C. And if this top angle is angle A, that means the side directly opposite would have to be side A. So I'll put a lowercase letter a. And if this is angle C, that means the side directly opposite from angle C would have to be marked as little c. Now I want to check before I plug everything into my equation. I just want to see if there's any other information that we could figure out on our own. So for example, are there any angles that we can figure out? Remember that we know that all of the angles inside of a triangle can add together to give us a sum of 180 degrees. Now I'm only given one of the three angles. We have angle B. We don't know anything about angle A, and we also don't know anything about angle C. I don't have enough information given that I could try to calculate either angle A or angle C, so we're just going to leave our diagram as is. So because we're asked to find the measure of side B, we're going to start our cosine law equation with lowercase letter b, and it also needs to be squared. We're then going to put an equal sign, and then it's going to be your choice. You can either start with the letter A, or you could use the letter C. The order of letters that you put next in building your equation does not matter. So I'm just going to try to keep my letters in alphabetical order. It's just a good method of practice to use when building your cosine law equation. So I'm going to put A next. That needs to be squared. Then it would be a plus sign. And the only other letter that we haven't touched or used is C. So I'm going to put a little c. That also needs to be squared. Then would come a minus sign, a 2. And then you are going to repeat the letters that you used. So we used A. So I'm going to put an A next. And then we had a C. So I'm going to put a C next. And then we need to take the cosine of angle B. I'm going to put it in brackets so that way it's easy to distinguish from the other two letters. And remember, if you started your equation with the letter B, you need to end with angle B. So you start with a lowercase letter, but your equation needs to end with an uppercase letter. And remember, uppercase letters represent angles. So we're trying to solve for the side, little b, and our equation should therefore end with the matching angle, angle b. So this is the version of the cosine law that we are going to use to solve for side b. The next thing I want to do is fill in all of the information that was given to us in our diagram. So we are looking for side B, so we're going to keep b squared. I can plug in the value of A. According to my diagram, side A is 20. That needs to be squared. Plus side C, which is 16. That needs to be squared. Minus 2 multiplied by side A, multiplied by side C, multiplied by the cosine of angle B. Angle B is 52 degrees, so we're going to fill that in as well. So when you begin to simplify your equation, it's really important to take it step by step and make sure that you are following the rules of BEDMAS. It is very easy to miss a step or calculate something out of order, and that could lead you to the incorrect final answer. So the first thing I'm going to do is calculate my squared numbers. So 20 squared is 400. Plus 16 squared, which is 256. Now we have a long multiplication statement or expression that needs to be performed here. But what I want to do is first calculate what the cosine of 52 degrees is. Once I figure that out, then I can worry about completing this multiplication. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recopy the minus sign. I'm going to recopy the 2. I'm going to recopy 20 and 16, but I am going to go ahead and put cosine of 52 into my calculator. Now remember, you want to make sure that your calculator is in degree mode because we are working with angles measured in degrees. So the cosine of 52 is going to give me a long decimal number. We are going to round our number off a little bit. Remember, we don't want to round too much because then our final answer will be a little off. So I'm going to choose to keep 3 decimal places when I round off my answer, and that's going to give me 0.616. Okay, so I'm going to recopy b squared equals 400 plus 256. I have a minus sign. And now what I'm going to do is the multiplication. So I need to multiply 2 times 20 times 16 times 0.616. So everything that I've kind of enclosed in this red boxed bracket, all of those digits or all those numbers have to be multiplied together. So once you multiply all of those numbers together, you will get 394.24. So again, I'm not rounding that number off. It's not that long of a decimal. I'm going to use every single digit in that number. So now I have an expression that can be simplified by collecting like terms. So what that means is I can simply just add and subtract this entire piece together. So 400 plus 256 minus 394.24. All of that can be done in one step. So 400 plus 256 minus 394.24 will give me 261.76. Now that value is equal to b squared, but we don't want b squared, we want just the side b. So we need to get rid of the squared. To perform the opposite operation of something squared would mean that we want to take the square root. So we are going to take the square root on both sides of our equation. If we take the square root of 261.76, we need to round our final answer to the nearest tenth, which means only one decimal place in our final answer. So that means b would be equal to 16.2. Now there were units given in the original diagram. The side lengths were measured in meters. So this is actually going to be 16.2 meters. And so our final answer for the side length of side B is 16.2 meters. Now it's your turn to give it a try. You are going to use the cosine law to solve for side A. Remember to first set up your equation, and then you can plug in all of the given information to solve for the unknown side. Pause the video, give it a try, and come back when you're ready to see the full solution. Before you plug anything into your cosine law equation, make sure that you've gone ahead and labeled the sides on your triangle. So they did mark the angles for us with the letters A, B, and C. They went ahead and marked side A for us. So all that I needed to fill in was side B, which is directly across from angle B, and side C, which is directly across from angle C. Because we are asked to solve for side A, I know that my cosine law equation must start with lowercase letter a. So I have a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2 multiplied by b multiplied by c multiplied by the cosine of angle A. You know that you have built your equation properly if your equation starts with a lowercase letter a and ends with an uppercase letter A. So I've filled in all of the information that was given to me from the diagram. So I know side B is 18, which needs to be squared, plus side C, which is 21, also needs to be squared, minus 2 multiplied by 18 multiplied by 21 multiplied by the cosine of angle 61. Next, you want to simplify the equation as much as possible. So we have a squared, which is equal to 18 squared. 18 squared is 324, plus 21 squared, which is 441. We're going to recopy the rest, but we are going to put cosine of 61 degrees into our calculator, and we're going to round off the number that we get to 3 decimal places. So that's going to give us 0.485. The next thing that we want to do is perform the multiplication. So I'm going to recopy the first half of the equation up until the minus sign, and we are going to multiply 2 times 18 times 21 times 0.485. And the answer to that multiplication is going to give us 366.66. And now we can collect like terms by performing the addition and subtraction that we see. 324 plus 441 minus 366.66 is going to give us 398.34. Our final step is to take the square root of both sides so that we can isolate for side A. And if I take the square root of 398.34, I do get a decimal answer. Let's round this answer to 2 decimal places. So if I keep 2 decimal places in my final answer, that would give me 19.96. And in the original question, if I scroll back up, I can see that we used units of centimeters. So I'm going to make sure that I add those units into my final answer. So side A is equal to 19.96 centimeters. Now, what if we wanted to find the measurement of a missing or unknown angle? Well, the cosine law can be used to find missing angles in a non-right-angled triangle. So in example 2, we are asked to find the measure of angle A to the nearest degree. So that means our final answer for angle A should have no decimal places when we report the final value. So they did mark one angle as angle A, and that's this top angle right here. We are given all 3 of the side lengths on this triangle, but we don't have any information for these bottom 2 angles, and that's okay. The next thing we want to do is label these actual angles. So since they picked A, we'll keep it simple and we'll call this B and C. Because we are solving for angle A, we need to use a version of the cosine law that begins with the letter A. So we are going to start our equation with little a squared, which equals b squared plus c squared minus 2 multiplied by b multiplied by c multiplied by the cosine of angle A. So this is our equation, and we've seen this version or variation of the cosine law equation before. However, this time we are asked to solve for angle A. So we are going to have to take this equation and rearrange it so that we can get capital A by itself. So we are still going to follow a lot of what we've already seen. So we're going to take the numbers that were given to us in the diagram and we're going to plug everything into its correct spot. But we will have to do a little more extra rearranging in order to get angle A isolated. So we're going to start by plugging in all of the side lengths that were given to us. Now, if it helps you, let's actually go ahead and label the sides on our triangle before we plug anything in. So if this corner angle here is angle B, that means the side directly across from it would have to be side B. And then this side marked 26 would be side C. And the side marked 30 would be side A. Okay, so now I'm going to take these numbers and plug them in. So A would then be 30, needs to be squared, equals side B, which is 38 squared, plus side C, which is 26 squared, minus 2, multiplied by side B, which is 38, multiplied by side C, which is 26. And then we have the cosine of angle A. We don't know what angle A is. That's what we are going to solve for. We're now going to go ahead and simplify as much as possible. So 30 squared is 900, which equals 38 squared, which is 1,444, plus 26 squared, which is 676. We have a minus sign, and then we have this section where we typically perform some multiplication. So here we are only going to be multiplying 2 multiplied by 38 multiplied by 26, and we're going to stop there. There's nothing that we can do with this cosine of angle A portion because we can't put this into our calculator if we don't even know what angle A is. So if I multiply 2 times 38 times 26, that's going to give me 1,976, and I still have this cosine angle A attached to that. So make sure that you put them directly side by side. The next thing I want to do is collect any like terms. Now, where students sometimes make mistakes when we get to this portion of the solution is they forget that the 1976 is attached to the cosine A. So you cannot touch this 1976 because it is attached to your unknown variable. So we are going to ignore that for the time being. But instead, what I'm going to do is bring together all of my other numbers. So that means 1,444 can move over to the left-hand side of my equation, and so can 676. That's also going to move over to the left-hand side. So if I move those terms over, I'm going to have 900 minus 1,444 minus 676. Then I have my equal sign, and then on the right hand side I still have negative 1976 multiplied by the cosine of angle A. That is still there. We have not touched it, so leave it where it is. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and perform this subtraction. 900 minus 1,444 minus 676 is going to give you negative 1,220, and that is still equal to negative 1,976 multiplied by the cosine of A. Okay, now we're going to begin the process of isolating for A. So because we have this multiplication happening on the right-hand side, the first thing we're going to do is divide both sides by negative 1976. That's going to cause the numbers to cancel out on the right-hand side, and we'll just be left with cosine of angle A. On the left-hand side, if we perform that division, we are going to get a decimal answer. We're again going to round our decimal off to 3 decimal places. We don't want to round too much. And that's going to give me 0.617. On the right-hand side, I still have the cosine of angle A. So now to isolate for A, we need to get rid of the cosine. The opposite operation would have to be the inverse cosine. So we need to take the inverse of cosine on both sides of the equation. So if you take the inverse cosine on both sides of the equation, it's going to look something like this. So on the right-hand side, the inverse cosine and the cosine will cancel each other out, and you will simply be left with angle A. On the left-hand side of your equation, you are going to put into your calculator the inverse cosine of 0.617. Remember that your final answer needed to be rounded off to the nearest whole number or the nearest angle. So my final answer is going to be 52 degrees. Now it's your turn to solve for an unknown angle. So in the diagram that's on the screen, you are asked to solve for angle K. Now this particular question doesn't use the same letters A, B, and C like you're used to seeing in all of the previous examples, and that's okay. Remember that you should try to keep your letters in alphabetical order when you are setting up your cosine law equation. Also keep in mind that if you are solving for angle K, your equation should start with the letter K and end with the letter K. So go ahead and pause the video, try to solve for the angle, and then when you're ready, you can come back and see the full solution. So a good place to start would be to label the side lengths on your triangle with lowercase letters. So the side marked 13 centimeters should be little k. The side marked 14 centimeters should be little m, and the side marked 16 centimeters should be little n. Now it's time to check out the equation, see if you built the correct equation for cosine law. Your equation should be k squared equals m squared plus n squared minus 2 multiplied by m multiplied by n multiplied by the cosine of k. Now, it doesn't matter if you put m first or n first. as long as your equation started with lowercase k and ended with capital K, which represents angle K. You should then go ahead and fill in all of the side lengths into their appropriate locations in your cosine law equation. The next thing we're going to do is simplify. So we have 13 squared, which is 169, which equals 14 squared, which is 196, plus 16 squared, which is 256, minus, and now here is where you are going to multiply 2 times 14 times 16, and that's going to give you 448. Now, attached to that, you still have cosine of angle K. Next, we want to collect like terms. So that means 196 and 256 are going to move over to the left-hand side of the equation, and the minus 448 cosine K is going to stay where it is on the right-hand side. So that'll leave us with 169 minus 196 minus 256, which is equal to negative 448 multiplied by the cosine of K. I'm going to go ahead and perform the subtraction that is on the left-hand side of my equation, and that's going to give me negative 283. We now are going to begin isolating for K, and so the first thing we're going to do is divide both sides by negative 448. Remember that the negative 448 on the right-hand side will cancel out. When you divide, you are going to get a long decimal value. Remember that you're going to round off your answer to 3 decimal places, and so that's going to give us 0.632. And our final step to solve for angle K would be to eliminate or get rid of the cosine. So to do that, we are going to have to take the inverse cosine on both sides of the equation. Remember that by taking the inverse, you are canceling out the cosine on the right-hand side of your equation, and so that's going to leave you with angle K. On your calculator or in your calculator, you are going to enter the inverse cosine of 0.632. And if you round your final answer to the nearest degree or the nearest whole number, your answer for angle K will work out to be 51 degrees. And there you go. Now you are able to use the cosine law in order to solve for a side length or an angle for a non-right angle triangle. Your next step to practice would be to decide when should you use the sine law and when should you use the cosine law. If you need a refresher on the sine law, there is a link to that video tutorial in the description box below.